Hi everyone, so we're busy with another training video. I think it's our last one, Numbers chapter 32. Hope you've enjoyed the series as much as we have as we've prepared for these videos and for the sermons and the studies. Take a moment now and pray as we look at Numbers 32. So here's a sort of overview of the book. We're in this final section here. Actually, this part here, so it's just post the second census. That second census, of course, is very significant. It marks the second generation gathering for battle as they wait in the plains of Moab, and all that remains is for them to actually go in and conquer the land. And I mentioned that in this final section, there are two things that threaten to derail the second generation. The first is impurity, and we see them come through this threat in the way that they deal with the Midianite crisis, partly through Phinehas's zeal, but also through their thorough destruction of the Midianites. In that sense, they show they're better than generation one. The other threat to them, potential threat to them in this stage, is disunity. There are a few, this comes up a few times. Perhaps the story of Zelophehad's daughters is another potential threat to unity. But the clearest threat to unity is what happens in Numbers 32. And I'll be pretty brief here. I'd advise you to listen to the sermon. It was a while ago. If you haven't listened to it, what I say here doesn't add much to what I said in the sermon. But these two tribes, basically Gad and Reuben, and then later on the half-tribe of Manasseh, they ask Moses whether they can not go into the promised land. They like the look of these other lands here for their sheep, and so they say here in 32 verse 5, "Let this land be given to your servants as our possession. Do not make us cross the Jordan." Now, it's a hugely significant thing. If you think about the whole book of Numbers, the whole history of Israel since Exodus has been about getting to this land that God has promised. We've seen what they've been through, seen how the previous generation got to the brink of the promised land, and then the spies who went in, apart from Joshua and Caleb, the spies sowed disunity and rebellion. And this seems to be happening again with these 2.5 tribes wanting to just hang back and not join in the battle and not claim the land that God has promised. So it really, at first glance, these first few verses, it seems like a real rejection of God's promises and of his plans. And that is why Moses takes it so seriously. He expresses two main reasons for the rebuke. The first one is kind of, I guess, the lesser one, where he just says that, look, by not going in, you'll discourage the other Israelites. That is true of any kind of selfishness or, in current church life. If we just live for ourselves, we discourage other Christians. So Moses points that out. But I guess the bigger reason is just that it seems to be the same hard-heartedness, the same sin that their forefathers were guilty of. That's how Moses refers to them here. And look at the warning, look how strong this is. For if you turn away from following him, he will again abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all this people. So by this action of hanging back from the promised land, they are threatening the safety of all the people. So it's a very serious thing. Now it seems, just in summary, that after this warning, the good news is that the Reubenites and the Gadites listened to that warning. And that's detailed in the rest of the chapter. And it's repeated a number of times, the fact that they agree that they will go in and fight with the other Israelites, and they will not go back and claim their land until every other Israelite tribe is settled. So in fact, they leave their women and their children in their in these areas here. They take that risk, they leave their loved ones behind, they go and fight the battle, and on those conditions, Moses, as God's representative, is happy to give them the land on, if you like, the wrong side of the Jordan. So what seems to be a crisis is averted. What's striking is that although God has promised this land to them, and all the way through he's made it very clear about the importance of this land. Numbers 34, he'll outline the boundaries of this land. It's clear from this story that actually what's more important to him than the specific boundaries is actually the condition of people's hearts. When Gad and Reuben show themselves to be faithful and willing to join in the battle and willing to trust God in conquering the promised land, when they do that, God seems less bothered about which particular plot of land they take. And so he gives them this land on the other side of the Jordan. When the battle is done, we need to fast forward all the way to Joshua to see what happens there. But Joshua 22, 1-6, this is the end of the story, happy ending. You'll see that they carried out exactly what they said. And so Joshua, who's taken the place of Moses, he holds up his side of the deal, and they get exactly what they wanted. So look, it's a nice way to end our studies in the book of Numbers. This crisis is averted, and we can fast forward to Joshua to see Israel happily settled in the land. There's another summary of that actually in Nehemiah. Just some nice language here. You don't have to go here with your groups, but I just thought as we wrap up the series, just a few kind of comments. This is how centuries later Nehemiah summarizes the end of the book of Numbers. Look at the language used here just to describe this beautiful land. They captured fortified cities and a rich land and took possession of houses full of all good things, cisterns already hewn, vineyards, olive orchards, and fruit trees in abundance. So they ate and were filled and became fat and delighted themselves in your great goodness, in God's great goodness. That is where you get to at the end of the book of Joshua. But of course we know from the rest of the Old Testament that that it doesn't stay this way. And actually all along this promised land was only a picture of a perfect land that God would introduce in the future. He promises that in Isaiah. Sorry, those verses aren't coming through on my screen for some reason, but there, if you look at Isaiah 25, 6-9, just a wonderful prophecy of what God will do when he fulfills his promises of this land for all his people to dwell in. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. He will remove the disgrace of his people from all the earth. The Lord has spoken. In that day they will say, surely this is our God. We trusted in him and he saved us. This is the Lord. We trusted in him. Let us rejoice and be glad in his salvation. I know we've seen some violence, some conquest, some quite shocking things in Numbers, and God's judgment through those things is a reminder to us of the coming judgment of hell. But we've also seen the wonderful news of his people settling in a land, and that is a foreshadowing of the land that we have to look forward to, heaven itself, with Jesus at the center. There's Numbers 32. Hope your studies go really well, and keep praying, and keep encouraging your groups to read their Bibles over the holiday period and to bring their friends along to all our Christmas events.